The Nintendo Switch 2. Well, this isn't the Nintendo Switch 2, this is actually just a Nintendo Switch, but you know what I'm saying. You've heard a lot about it. The good, the bad, the ugly. What exactly is it? Is it really that big of an upgrade? Why is everybody talking about how expensive the console and the games are? Today, we're gonna talk about the Nintendo Switch 2 in detail. Every finite detail, at least that I can find, or that has been released, and we're gonna talk about all the controversial stuff, pricing, release date, and just exactly what I think about it. Some of you are probably not gonna like it, but that's okay. This is an opinion, right? This is a subjective video. This is the Nintendo Switch 2 Deep Dive. The Nintendo Switch 2, something I said Nintendo would never do. But alas, I was wrong. Nintendo comes out and they announce that it's actually called the Nintendo Switch 2. They couldn't have called it like the Super Nintendo Switch or something cool and throwback like that. They had to call it the Nintendo Switch 2. And if you remember some of my videos in the past, I said there's no way Nintendo calls this thing the Switch 2. They've never done that. In the history of Nintendo, they've never called one of their consoles the Nintendo 2, sort of with the Wii, I guess, but that was the Wii U, and if you really break that console down, you can see the DNA for the Nintendo Switch. What Nintendo really wanted to do was marry their two markets, their handheld market and their home console market. It was the perfect marriage, right? They've always been the leader in the handheld space with the Game Boy Advance, the DS, the 3DS, and it was only natural for them to merge those markets. It's incredibly beneficial for the audience, the player, like us, and of course for Nintendo's development teams, because why develop two Marios when you can develop one Mario? Makes a lot of sense, and if you know me, I love handhelds. Ever since I held a Game Boy, I knew that was the way I wanted to play all of my games, and I just couldn't help but to think, is there a future here someday where we actually have a handheld that can play all of the AAA games? And we do now. We live in a world with the ROG Allies and the Steam Decks. You know, really, Nintendo sort of launched that with the Switch, but the Switch had its limits. The Switch wasn't, even at the time of release, super powerful. Now we know Nintendo doesn't rely on that sort of stuff. They rely on, you know, the art of Nintendo, the craftsmanship that goes into their games. And that's what really made the Switch so special, because it wasn't very long before everyone else in the market completely surpassed them. I mean, we have stuff like the PS5 and the PS5 Pro now. We even have stuff like the Ally X, the Xbox Series X, that far superior. And even PC gaming has gone a long way since the introduction of the Nintendo Switch, which is coming up on close to a decade, right? 7 years, 8 years. So it's only natural for Nintendo to give the fans just, you know, more of what they want. When they had the Wii U, they knew they had something. This was sort of, in my opinion, them testing the market. How much do people really want to play on like a little tablet? But what if they could also hook it up to the TV? Well, the Wii U, you know, you're kind of tethered. You couldn't get too far. They did that with the Switch. So with the popularity of the Switch and really sales not slowing down at all, why not just give us a better Switch? So they announced Nintendo Switch 2. And I was completely wrong. I said they would never do that. And here we are. The other prediction of mine that was completely off base was the launch titles. I thought for sure we were gonna get a Super Mario Odyssey 2. That made a lot of sense, right? We have a sequel to the Switch with the Switch 2. And what was one of the greatest Switch launch titles? Super Mario Odyssey. This might ruffle some feathers, but in my opinion, the best Super Mario Brothers. Granted, I was the first game I ever beat with my son. It holds a special place in my heart. I was kind of wrong all the way around the board. It's called the Nintendo Switch 2, and it's not launching with a mainline 3D Mario game. So let's talk about the console. Just exactly how powerful is a Nintendo Switch 2? Well, it's a custom chipset, so it's really kind of hard to gauge. There's nothing else really out there on the market that is using it. We do know it's an NVIDIA T239, I believe, but that really doesn't tell us all that much. What I'm gauging and what everyone who has played it, gone hands-on, and what some of the developers are saying is it's about on par with an Xbox One or a PlayStation 4. And I know what you're saying, oh my God, that is like way last gen, right? I mean, when we're talking about a handheld, not really. That sort of puts it on par with something like a Steam Deck. Again, it's a really reductive way to compare a Nintendo hardware. You've never really been able to compare Nintendo hardware with other manufacturers' hardware. So for me to sit here and say the Nintendo Switch 2 is as powerful, slightly less powerful than an ROG Ally X, I don't know. It's sort of reductive because we know Nintendo's craft is in their game development and they take full advantage of hardware. We've seen that with every one of their consoles. Now, internal storage on a Nintendo Switch 2, 256 gigabytes of space. Not a lot, if you want my opinion. I have a 1 terabyte SD card in my current Switch, and it's always full. Now, you can expand that with micro SD up to 2 terabytes, and it does use a faster read drive on the micro SD card, so it will load games faster. So all in all, you're gonna get, I don't know, what is that, 2.25 terabytes of space? That's passable, considering I would imagine most of these games are gonna range somewhere between 20, 25 gig and 80 gig. And this time around, finally, Nintendo's joined the club. It is all about 4K and 120 frames a second. Except it's 4K when it's docked and it runs at 120 frames in handheld. So you actually aren't getting that combination. To my knowledge, you're not getting that combination together. The screen on a Switch 2 is not 4K, it's 1080, and it's not going to play in 4K at 120 frames when it's docked on your television. It's going to play in 60 frames. So 4K, 60 frames. You do have the option to switch into a performance mode for a lot of these games. I have seen lots of footage of Metroid Prime 4 running docked in 120 frames, and boy, does it look fantastic. Now, the other thing to note is the Switch 2 is an LCD display, not an OLED display. It does run at 1080p when it's in handheld mode, and some of the games are gonna run at 120 frames a second. And this display, or the display on the Switch 2, again, this is the Switch 1, they're gonna have HDR support. I'm not super concerned about it not being an OLED display. I think that technology at this point, the OLED argument is a little bit tired. Really, the thing that the OLED does is gives you those really rich blacks, those dark scenes. The Switch 2 has a 7.9-inch display, so you do have, you know, it doesn't sound like a lot, but you do have a substantially larger screen, which is nice. Now again, like I said, there will be options for a lot of these games. You're gonna have performance mode as an option, and you're gonna have quality mode as an option. So depending on what kind of person you are, if you wanna sacrifice your frames per second for a higher resolution, you could totally do that. Me personally, I would prefer performance mode. I would rather have that higher frame rate. Now let's talk about battery power. That's something that I've seen some complaints on. Battery power is actually gonna be pretty close to what an Ally X or even a Steam Deck will get you. They're saying it's between 2 and 6.5 hours of gameplay in handheld mode. I would imagine the 2 hours is going to come from something intensive like Mario Kart World or a Cyberpunk, and a 6-hour gameplay sesh is probably going to come from, you know, something that doesn't demand a lot of power. But to be honest with you, what do you expect out of a device that is, you know, considerably thin? Where are you going to put a battery in there? Even this giant thing here is twice as thick as the Switch, and the battery life on this thing is still about 2.5-3 hours if I got everything cranked up. One of the good things is they added another USB port to the top of the Switch, which is fantastic because you can set it down and you can charge while you have this thing, you know. It does have a kickstand, and I should note that the new dock for the Switch 2 does have a built-in cooling fan. The thing must have, you know, substantially more horsepower than this, enough for it to warrant needing to be cooled while it's in a dock, or them feeling like they needed to add a cooler. Nobody wants to run into the red ring of death situation, right? So that's the actual console itself. Now, let's talk a little bit about my least favorite thing about the original Switch, which is the JoyCons. One of the biggest failures I think Nintendo had with the Switch was the Joy-Con for multiple reasons. Obviously, we have Joy-Con drift, but we also have the rails. You know, like we have, that's where the Switch sound came from, which is cool. It's a satisfying Switch, but unless you actually installed, you know, the metal clips in your Joy-Cons like I did here, most of the time you'll see on this one, because it's not metal, they stop locking, because the only thing holding that thing onto the rail is actually just a little plastic clip here with this button. And once you've done this enough, or maybe you've dropped it a couple of times, like my kids have done this one, and you've broken that piece of plastic, it doesn't hold anymore. So what has Nintendo done? They've made it magnetic. That sounds crazy, right? Like, how strong could a magnet be? But from every video I've seen, shout out to Beat 'em Up, their videos when they played the Switch 2 seem pretty strong. So the magnets seem like a very welcome addition to the Joy-Con. I like the idea of a magnet instead of this rail. The other big thing, the other big addition that they've added to the Joy-Cons is mouse controls. So there's actually a sensor on the sides of the Joy-Cons, and it acts as a mouse. So you can actually set this thing down on a table and use it as a mouse. It's sort of a novel idea, right? Especially for something like a first-person shooter, which at these Nintendo Switch 2 events, I'm seeing a lot of people try out stuff like Cyberpunk and like Metroid Prime 4 Echoes in this mode. The other thing that I think is really cool is you can seamlessly go from controlling your game with the mouse and just pick your Joy-Cons up and start playing this way if you want. You don't have to go into a menu and like, you know, change options. Why do we still use a mouse? Like, aren't we at the point now where we can just like Tony Stark it? Can't we just use our fingers and stuff? I don't know, Nintendo, it just seems funny. The other thing is, unless this is some kind of surprise announcement, why did we not get Mario Paint 2 as a Switch 2 launch title if one of the selling points of your Joy-Con is the fact that it's a mouse? The only game that substantially used a mouse in Nintendo's history of games is Mario Paint. It came with a mouse. It was a fantastic mouse game. And now they've said, hey, guess what? Your controller can be used as a mouse. Remember that mouse game that we put out on the Super Nintendo? We're gonna ignore that it exists. That would have been like such great fan service. Come on, Nintendo. I mean, again, unless I'm spoiling some kind of like crazy launch day secret, I don't know. Just don't charge $80 for it. I'm just kidding. We'll get to that. The biggest problem with the Joy-Con 2s by far, so far, is the fact that they're still not using Hall Effect sticks. A Hall Effect thumbstick is not going to give you thumbstick drift, or what we now call Joy-Con drift. Thank you, Nintendo. Hall Effect sticks aren't expensive, Nintendo. I mean, we're talking, you know, maybe cents more than a standard analog stick. It just, you know, and I get it. When you're talking mass production, Nintendo was already kind of at this weird tipping point with price, so maybe don't add anything else to the cost of the machine. Maybe that was a smart idea. I don't know. We'll see how nice those thumbsticks feel. Everyone that I've talked to that have played them say they feel nice, but now the last new addition to the Joy-Con 2s is that infamous C button. It's a little button that's on the very bottom of the controller, and really it's not a big deal. I mean, everybody was so like, what's the new button? What is the new button for? Turns out it's a community, it's like a chat button. and we'll talk about it in a second. Interestingly enough, I think this is really fantastic. Your original Joy-Cons, they actually work with the Nintendo Switch 2, and your Pro Controller works with a Nintendo Switch 2. Wirelessly, obviously, because they're magnetic, and the new ones are magnetic. They removed the IR sensor from the bottom of the right Joy-Con. So if you want to play stuff like, what uses that IR sensor? Labo games, I guess. Okay, now moving on to the next thing, let's talk about like the game delivery system. And the Nintendo Switch 2 takes Nintendo Switch game cards. Yeah, these little game cards here, it takes the same exact game card. Now the game card has been updated a little bit. It now holds up to 64 gigabytes of memory, so you will still be able to buy physical games. Don't worry, folks. But they have announced that if the game is over 64 gigabytes, you will have to download part of that game, or in some cases, it's just a code that's on the card, and you'll have to download the whole game. I know some people are fired up about that too. Oh, they're taking us to an all-digital future. Ah! Yeah, I love physical stuff too, guys, but there are limitations, right? These things hold 64 gigabytes. If the game is bigger than 64 gigs, what would you ask of them? I don't remember if it was a project lead or somebody from CD Projekt Red talking about Cyberpunk, and they did say the entire game of Cyberpunk is on the game card. Kind of makes you wonder, at 64 gigs, I feel like Cyberpunk is well over a 100 gig game, so I mean, there must be some sacrifices being made there, right? So anyways, all of the games will be on game cards, just like this, which means full backwards compatibility with the Nintendo Switch and Nintendo Switch 2, which is fantastic. I know what you're saying, Tofer. It's not full backwards compatibility. They're saying select titles. That's because they removed the IR sensor from the bottom of the right-hand Joy-Con. So naturally, not everything's gonna be compatible. Obviously, it's a fine print thing, guys. Nintendo Switch Online. Nintendo Switch Online carries over. Nothing really changes there. In fact, they are building upon that storefront by exclusively releasing GameCube games to the Nintendo Switch 2, starting with Legend of Zelda Wind Waker and Soul Calibur, just to name a few. I think that's really, really cool. If you are a Nintendo Switch Online Plus expansion pack member, where you had NES games, Super NES games, N64 games, yeah, if you already have that, then you will have access to the GameCube stuff when it launches with the Nintendo Switch 2. It's $50 a year for the whole thing, or I think it's $80 a year if you want to do it for the whole family. If I could play through Wind Waker in 1080 and 120 frames, like on an airplane, count me in. And maybe then I won't have to carry around my portable GameCube all the time, right? I do also want to note they are releasing a GameCube controller for the Switch 2, which if you remember when they first did the NES and the Super NES and the N64, they have controllers. The GameCube controller looks awesome. You know, it looks very, it's a GameCube controller, but it works for your Switch. And now let's talk about the really fun part. Let's talk about the launch lineup. I'm not gonna go through all of them. I'm gonna go through the ones that, you know, I think are really exciting, starting with Mario Kart World. The reveal of Mario Kart World just sort of took me completely by surprise. I never expected Mario Kart to be what it seems to have grown into. And everybody I've talked to, again, that has played Mario Kart World already are just completely blown away. They've given it the Burnout Paradise treatment, where you complete a circuit, and then instead of you being transported to the next circuit, you actually, it's part of the race. You race to the next track, and then race your next race, and then race to the next track. It's online multiplayer. It supports up to 24 racers on the track now. It's open world, so if you and your friends want to just gallivant through the world of Mario Kart, you could totally do that. Drag and Drive, or Drag X Drive? I don't know how you say this one, but this is the game where they're really trying to show off the mouse controls of the thing. It's like basketball, but you're in you're in like a wheelchair, you know, and you're playing basketball out of a chair. Which, I don't know, it seems fine, but it also seems like the kind of game that's just, it's there to show off the capabilities, sort of like ARMS was. The other really cool game that I am really excited about is we're getting a new Hyrule Warriors, which is crazy because I didn't think it would happen. But here we are, Age of Imprisonment. We're getting Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment. It actually follows the story leading up to Tears of the Kingdom. And then we got a trailer that I was not expecting at all, Duskbloods. This is a From Software exclusive title for the Nintendo Switch 2, which is like, again, sort of mind-blowing. Let's just call it what it is. It's Bloodborne 2, but you know, Sony owns the Bloodborne IP, and for whatever reason, are not wanting to make another game, or they're keeping it hostage. I don't know what they're doing with it. Holding it in their pocket for that special day. This is like a multiplayer Bloodborne 2 called Duskbloods. It looks awesome. Kirby Air Riders. I never really got into Kirby Air Ride for the GameCube. I've actually never really been like a huge Kirby guy. Not that I dislike them. They're great. Leland likes them. They've never really done anything for me. And so Kirby Air Riders was one of those games. I know there's a lot of people seem to be really excited about it. GameCube sequel. But for me, it was just kind of like, okay, I'm happy for the people who are thrilled about this game. Donkey Kong Bonanza. Boy, what can I say about Donkey Kong Bonanza? The game that was supposed to be Mario Odyssey 2? I assume. I think that Nintendo was just, they were already well into development on Mario Odyssey 2, and with the success of the Mario movie, they wanted to move Mario a little further down the line and align it with maybe a Mario movie sequel. A movie launching at the same time as a new 3D Mario game sounds like a recipe for success, right? That's my theory, and so they decided, boy, what do we do instead? You know, DK hasn't had his shot in a while. It's been like a long time, Nintendo 64, since Donkey Kong has gotten his due in a 3D platformer. Leland's very excited, and this game looks very, very good. It's an open world Donkey Kong game. It is Mario Odyssey with Donkey Kong skin. It's the same team and everything. So if that thing floats your boat, Donkey Kong Bonanza, I think that's one of the standout launch titles, and I think that's going to be one that's going to take everyone by surprise. Survival Kids. This is a Konami-developed like puzzle action game that like has 4 players in it. I don't know. It looks like I'll definitely give it a shot, but I really don't have any real opinion on it. We also have Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. Now this is that infamous, I always call it filling the gap title that Nintendo loves to do. They love to launch a game right about the same time they're launching a console, and then they launch like a previous gen version and a new gen version. They've done it with many Zelda games over the years. This is that game. I kind of called that. That was one of the predictions I got right, at least. Metroid Prime 4 Beyond coming to the Switch 2. No surprise there. And then we have 3 GameCube classics launching with the system. That is Wind Waker, Soul Calibur 2, and F-Zero GX. And then we have a handful of other games that were announced. We have Elden Ring Tarnished Edition. That gives you sort of an idea of what kind of power we might be dealing with. There was a trailer for Borderlands 4. Randy Pitchford came out and talked about Borderlands 4. So cool, I guess Borderlands 4 is coming to the Switch. I don't know. I loved Borderlands 1 and 2, but I don't know. We'll see. We'll see about Borderlands 4. Bravely Default Flying Fairy HD Remaster. Square Enix loves to name their games really strange and like tongue twisty. But if you like Bravely Default, that will be a Switch 2 launch title. We got Cyberpunk 2027 Ultimate Edition. One of the guys from CD Projekt Red was saying they fit the entire game onto one cart. So no downloads, it's all plays from the cart. All the gameplay I've seen of Cyberpunk on a Switch 2 looks fantastic. Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade, which is the first of the trilogy in the Final Fantasy VII Remake series. Don't know when that is, though. It didn't say if it was launch title or not. Hades 2. We got Hades 2. Hades 1 was a fantastic game. Hitman World of Assassination. I think this is interesting because they had like a cloud version of that for the original Switch that I tested for. I love the Hitman franchise, especially the newest 1 through 3, or what they now call World of Assassination. And they're doing fantastic things. I love what IO is doing with the Hitman franchise and keeping that game like a live game. So I love to see it come to the Switch. Hogwarts Legacy. I loved Hogwarts Legacy. My wife loved Hogwarts Legacy. Hogwarts Legacy is already on the Switch. It runs like a pile of dog poo. So maybe the Switch 2 version will fix that, maybe? We got Hollow Knight Silk Song. If you're a Hollow Knight fan, got a new Hollow Knight game coming. Human Fall Flat 2. Leland was really excited about this one. I've never really played Human Fall Flat. I've watched him play it. If you like those puzzle platformers like that, that's coming. Puyo Puyo Tetris 2S. I liked Puyo Puyo Tetris. That was a fun game, so I'm definitely looking forward to Puyo Puyo Tetris 2. I thought this was an interesting one. Star Wars Outlaws. I don't know, maybe Ubisoft is thinking like, boy, we didn't make a whole lot of money on that Star Wars Outlaws game, so what do we do? I don't know, let's launch it on Nintendo's new console and hopefully we get some sales, with that. We'll see. Split Fiction's coming to the Switch too. I think that's awesome. That's Hazelight's new split screen couch co-op. I mean, if you haven't watched us play it, you should go check out some of those videos. My wife is absolutely loving those games. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4. I love Tony Hawk. I'm a big fan. I can't wait for this game. Switch 2 is probably not where I'm going to play it. I've watched a lot of trailers for it. When I saw the Switch 2 trailer for Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4, you can, from somebody who's watched a lot of footage of Tony Hawk 3 and 4 and then watched footage of it on the Switch 2, you're like, I could see, where it's like sort of dumbed down a little bit. So that's our launch titles and launch window titles, or stuff that's already been announced. Now there is another thing that it seems as though I was wrong about, but I'm still sticking to my guns on this, and I said we're gonna see a lot of Xbox games launch with the Switch 2, and we didn't see any in this presentation. Xbox has a what do they call that? Xbox showcase thing in June. I believe it's June 8th, which is just a few days after the Switch 2 launches. So I wouldn't be surprised if Xbox was holding that announcement themselves. So let's talk real quick about this whole game upgrade system, because this is a little bit confusing. It seems to be pissing people off, even though I don't think we fully understand it yet. So a lot of Switch games are saying they're going to get Switch 2 upgrades. What does that mean? Performance upgrades, basically. Updates. I think there's confusion between expansions and updates. An expansion adds new content to the game. An update is just an update. So, like if you pop your old Switch game in and there's a little bit of an update that, maybe makes it play at a higher frame rate, an expansion would be adding more material to the game. Now, where it gets really foggy is something like Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom. I watched those videos multiple times to see if I can understand it, and it does look very neat. They're adding a lot to Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. But the issue is they're adding it behind like an app on your phone. So it's very strange. Lots of new story beats. One thing that Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom was thin on, and I'm sure people are gonna think I'm crazy, but like it was kind of narrative story. It's an open world game. It's fantastic. There is an overarching story there, but this update is bringing tons of new voiceover work by the original actors from the games to these new games. Unfortunately, you gotta do it on your phone or on your app, which is weird. And I thought at first, I'm still confused. I thought at first it was something that you pay for. And I was like, well, I don't want to pay for that. Like, why? I want it in the game, right? But now it seems like maybe it's not something you pay for. If you have the Nintendo Switch Online Plus expansion pack, then I think it's part of just you pop the thing in and you download the app. The other thing is QR codes. You can build this crazy contraption in Tears of the Kingdom and then generate a QR code and share that QR code with your friends. They can then scan it into their game, and your crazy contraption that you built in Tears of the Kingdom will be there. Stuff like that, really cool. Now let's touch real quick on the new button, the C button. Such a big deal was made of that thing, and then it ended up being nothing really. But it's a new chat and video system. The C button is basically for communication. We now have a full voice chat and video chat into the Switch. I don't know who's excited about this. I'm not. My kids seem to be excited about it. Games now have full like chat functionality, full like typing chat functionality. There does seem to be like some features with the camera that you can integrate into the games, but everything that I saw from people playing, it was just sort of like, I don't know, novel. It was a novelty. The camera is super low resolution that they're selling. It's like 420p or something like that. It's a really low res camera. Let's talk about the thing everyone wants to talk about. I'm gonna give you my opinion. You're probably not gonna like it, but hey, you can hit the comments and leave your opinion if you want. Let's talk about price. The Nintendo Switch 2 is launching at $450. And if you want the console with Mario Kart, it's $500. A set of JoyCons will cost you $89.99, $90. And a Pro controller will cost you $79.99. And the camera that, you know, nobody's probably gonna buy is $50, but any old USB camera will work. Game prices. Here's another hot button topic. Game prices are ranging between, my guess is probably $60 and $80. Looks like on average, they're gonna be $70 to $80. Like something like Donkey Kong is already priced at $69.99. Mario Kart Worlds is priced at $79.99. So, boy, I don't even wanna read the comments in this. $70, $80 for a game, $450 or $500 for a console. The console price doesn't bother me, to be honest with you. I predicted it was gonna come in at $400, but after seeing everything and seeing what they've done, $450 seems totally fair. I have no problems with $450. If you go back and look at some of the consoles, this isn't the most expensive console that Nintendo's ever launched. Just, you know, if you wanna account for stuff like inflation. The NES and the Super NES actually, by today's standards, were more expensive. Yeah, sure, it is up there. It ain't no PS5 Pro, and you really can't compare it to something like an ROG Ally X, even though these things are $700 or whatever they are. But when Nintendo releases a console for $450, it seems to, like, people are in outrage. Boy, what a sensitive topic to like dance around. I'm just gonna give you my opinion. I don't think that's crazy expensive, and I get it. You know, especially with the rising prices of everything. But that should be the factor here. It's not like Nintendo is gouging. It's like the prices of everything are going up. People are gonna come to the Nintendo Switch because of the art of Nintendo. The development that goes into their games. The fine-tuning, the craftsmanship is just something that you really don't get. And some people are willing to pay for that. And I see by a lot of your comments, some people are not, and that's totally okay. This is a sort of a subjective thing. Mario Kart, $80. What if, hypothetically, don't kill me in the comments here, but what if Mario Kart is an $80 game? And I don't mean what if it costs $80. I mean, what if its value is $80? Let's do a fun little experiment here. Like, what if it has thousands of hours worth of content? And what if upon its release, they continue to update it with new things? It's a live title. They're adding things all the time to it, right? And what if they don't charge us for stuff like that? It's hypothetical. Maybe they will. If they do, we'll talk about that in a future video where I say, oh, I was wrong. They charged us $20 for an expansion pack. What if they don't? What if they continue to give us new content and new updates and they support this game for the next 5 years? Mario Kart 8 has been supported now for 8 years? Longer than that if you go all the way back to the Wii U. They did have downloadable content that cost money, so let's look at it from that perspective. What if they release the game, they continue to update it, and they don't charge for it? Does it make it an $80 value? I think there is totally such a thing as a $100 game. In my head, a Grand Theft Auto 6 could very easily be a $100 game. Something that's gonna provide that much entertainment and content probably should cost more than your typical game. If you took you and your 2 kids or your 3 kids to the movies to see Minecraft, it's gonna cost you $80. You watch an hour-and-a-half movie. That's not including popcorn and all this other stuff. And we don't have a problem with that. But for some reason, thinking about a video game being $80 makes people rage out. And I've seen comments where people are like, man, Nintendo's the one who finally did it. It wasn't EA, it wasn't Activision. Nintendo broke the $80 seal. Well, you're wrong. When I was growing up in the 90s, I didn't, but my parents paid $80 or $90 for plenty of video games throughout the SNES, the Sega Genesis, and the N64. That was pretty common then. Now, I know some of you are gonna make the argument that like, well, that was because the chips they used in it. The chips were expensive. But what were development teams back then? How big was a development team back in the 80s or 90s? Well, how long was the game in development? If we're talking about E.T., it was only like 3 weeks, right? And they charged $50 for that game. So, is there such thing as an $80 game? I think so. I think it's possible. Now, I'm not saying that this game is worth it. I haven't played it. It might not be. I am one to give the benefit of the doubt. And maybe it's not. Maybe I'm wrong. Well, I think if Nintendo would have come out and said, Mario Kart's free to download, and then $15 a month, I think everybody would be pissed off then too. So, the only thing that was going to make people happy is if Nintendo released this stuff at, $250 for the console and $50 or $60 for the game. But let's be realistic, things just aren't that way anymore. A gallon of gas when I graduated high school in 1998 was 99 cents. A loaf of cheap white bread was 89 cents. And video games were anywhere between $60 and $80. Today, a gallon of gas is what, $5? A loaf of bread is $3 maybe? And video games, up until like this last year, have still been $60. When you really put it into perspective, the bread is made at a factory by robots like 1,000 times faster than it was in the 80s or the 90s. But it takes a team that is like 10 times larger now to produce a AAA video game, and it takes probably 5 times longer to produce that than it did back in the 80s or 90s. Yet the price of games really haven't gone up. Now, I am by no means saying like we should just suck it up and just take it and pay $80 for a game. What I'm saying is maybe there are games that are worth that. Maybe some of these games are worth it. Not all of them are worth it. Don't get me wrong. I don't think every game should be $70 or $80. Nintendo has, with some exceptions, has never really let me down. I even like the Virtual Boy. Okay? I have a Virtual Boy store display right there. I'm willing to give it a chance to see if this is, maybe Mario Kart World is just gonna be like, totally next level stuff. Or, maybe it's not gonna be worth $90 physically. So that's the Nintendo Switch 2. The Nintendo Switch 2 launches on June 5th. I have a household of 4 gamers. So I'm gonna have to try and find 4 of these things. And if you wanna see exactly how I'm gonna do that, you should follow along, because the weekend that the Nintendo Switch 2 launches, I am actually going to be hosting multiple panels at the Southern California Gaming Expo. If you want to know more about that, the information is in the link below. You should come check it out if you're in the Southern California area. That Friday night, I'm going to try and find myself a Switch 2. Hopefully reservations are up by then, and I will have ordered some, but I got to get my hands on it then. How cool would it be to have that thing on Saturday at the expo, huh? I'm gonna be one of those people. So what do you guys think of the Nintendo Switch 2? I hate to even, ask, because people be getting real serious about it. But hey, this is our hobby. We all love it. We all care about it. That's why we're so passionate. But just remember, be nice to each other. Just because you don't have the same opinion as somebody else, or as me, or I don't have the same opinion as you, doesn't mean we both aren't passionate about the hobby. That's why we feel the way we do. That's why we get so pissed off if they say that a game is $80 or $90. We're like, damn you. Just some of us think a little bit differently about it. Hit the comments below. Let me know what you think. And on other Nintendo news fronts, this year, I think, is going to be the year of the Nintendo 64, because we have multiple companies putting out new Nintendo 64s. If you don't believe me, check out this video right here on the Analogue 3D. I think it's going to be really cool if and when it ever comes out. And if you don't want to miss videos like this or my adventures in getting multiple Nintendo Switch 2s for the family, follow along right here. Click that little bell notification icon. It'll let you know. Or join the Discord. That'll let you know when a video drops too. And until next time, enjoy the journey.